Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's workshop entitled Virtual Interview Success. My name is Jason Eckert and I serve as the University of Dayton's Executive Director of Career Services. And I am joined today by two amazing colleagues from the accounting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, Grace Wood and Maggie McMichael. And I'd like to invite Maggie to introduce herself and also to tag Grace.
Yes, thank you. I know I've been in contact with some of you, but I have been the stand-in recruiter for Grace while she has been out on maternity leave, which she'll share a little bit more about that with you in a minute. But we are kind of at a strange transition point where I am passing the reins back to her. So I wanted to come on and say hello because I know that my name was in all the advertising materials so that we didn't just do a bait and switch. So I am one of PwC's recruiters headed on to take on a few other schools in the coming weeks. So I'm sad I won't be working on Dayton any longer, but you're in wonderful hands with Grace. So I will pass it over to her and she'll be giving the presentation today with Jason.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Grace Wood. I'm sure I've talked to some of you and will be talking to a lot of you. So I'm the main campus recruiter here at PwC for UD. I've been at, been at PwC for over 6 years now. And I live in Chicago, so not local, but my husband actually went to UD, graduated in 2014, and his brothers both went there as well. So if you guys know Kyle Wood, Andy Wood, or Joey Wood, I am related to those guys. So I don't know if that's gonna be a good or bad thing, depending on your experiences with them. They're kind of crazy. But yeah, I'm really, really excited to be tuning in, talking to you guys about virtual interviews. Just really, obviously, it's very prevalent right now. PwC has actually done our interviews virtually for a couple years, even pre-COVID, but now it's obviously much more common with the pandemic. So happy to talk you guys through this and give as many tips as we can share.
Very good. Well, thanks to both Maggie and to Grace and to PwC for being a part of today's workshop. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Lisa Witt, an assistant director here in Career Services. Lisa is helping to host this afternoon's event and will be monitoring questions in the chat room. So feel free to post any questions or queries in the chat as we go throughout the next 45 or so minutes. Hopefully all of you can see my screen. Grace, give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides. Perfect. Thank you very much. So as is the case with all Aviate events, I do need to briefly go over the Zoom guidelines in order for you to receive a path point. We do ask that you log in with your University of Dayton Zoom account as opposed to another Zoom account. We ask that you remain on mute unless we invite questions or invite you to respond to a particular question. That'll certainly help with distractions and background noise. As I mentioned, you must be logged in individually as opposed to in a room with others. Only points are awarded to people who are logged in with their University of Dayton Zoom account. And you also must be engaged during the course of the presentation with your camera turned on. We do have an ACE with us this afternoon, joining Lisa Witt, who will be helping and monitoring the student camera presence throughout this session. And it is a large session, and I want to warmly welcome you. It means a lot to me, certainly, as well as to Grace for you taking the time to join us here this late afternoon. So an opening word, this has been a college and a campus recruiting season like none other because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19. And I've talked to a few students who have said things like, you know, I know conditions are improving, I'm just gonna wait out this cycle, or I'm not gonna sign up for interviews because I'm just gonna wait until things change. And that is not my advice, nor is that a best practice. This is not the time to give up. In fact, there are great opportunities out there. We just had 3 days of, in my opinion, very strong virtual career fair interactions between students and employers. So don't give up. And if you do need someone to help point you in the right direction, please rely upon us in Career Services to help guide the way. We do offer appointments with amazing career advisors like Lisa Witt and myself, and you can always access our calendars through through Handshake, through the Career Center area within Handshake, and then select appointments. We do also offer a popular daily drop-in hours program offered every day from 12:15 until 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, that is. And the link to the virtual drop-in hours is available on the Career Services webpage. So why are we here? As Grace said, PricewaterhouseCoopers, along with most of our partner companies on campus and partner employers, are conducting virtual recruiting. We are not able right now to have employers on campus. The career fair was virtual. All of our on-campus interviews will be virtual this spring. And my prediction, and I would like to welcome Grace to come in here as well, I think this is also going to be a part of the future. I do think interviews will be face-to-face at some point in the future, but that may be a final interview. I really see companies using technology to continue to conduct first round or screening interviews. Grace, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, we actually moved to virtual interviews probably about a year before COVID hit, a couple recruiting seasons. And that was big at the time because a lot of our competitors weren't doing it. But for us, it was for a few reasons, was ease of scheduling for both students and interviewers. Hopefully makes it easier for students to grab those time slots that work for them as opposed to being told, we're coming to campus, October 17th, be there or you're out. And then also like to offer, we can get these interviews done quicker with more representation from the firm. So not only, you're not just going to talk to, maybe the same interview every time. We can get a UD alum from a different city, from, somewhere else who usually couldn't come to campus. We have more people to pick from, which means we can make these interviews happen quicker and get you that offer in hand earlier, which is what we've learned is really important to students looking for jobs.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. We've also seen so many employment opportunities converted to a virtual format. That even includes some on-campus jobs. And because of the pandemic, so many employers are working from home. In fact, from the looks of it, I think both of our guest recruiters today are currently working from home, and that's so common. And so if you are applying for internships right now, for many fields, you may have either a hybrid or a virtual experience even this summer. I know things are getting better. I know the vaccine is getting out there, but be patient because many internships still have a virtual component. I would also encourage you to be comfortable with video platforms, and all of us are using Zoom on campus for courses. Zoom is being used by a lot of companies. There's other software that's being used. Some of them are using programs as simple as Skype, but others are using corporate-based technology like HireVue. And it's important that you get comfortable in front of the camera and that you try to practice whatever platform that company might be using. And Grace, how is PwC approaching technology?
Yeah, so we're actually fully on Google's platform. So we use Google Hangouts for all of our one-on-one chats, all of our interviews, but it's really easy. So basically we just send students a link, they just click on it and it can open in their browser. You don't have to download any software or anything like that. But we obviously tune into Zoom. We've tuned into a lot of different Microsoft Teams, like you name it, we've done it. But that's what we've been using right now. And we actually don't do any pre-recorded interviews at this time. So all of ours are live on Google Hangouts. So hopefully that's one that people are pretty used to from kind of your day-to-day use with friends and everything like that.
For sure. And in fact, we are a Google campus, so a lot of our students are already using GChat and other Google products. So that is great. And we'll talk about one-way interviews coming up. So that was a good plug for a few slides down the road, Grace.
Perfect.
So let me share some tips for success and also get Grace's comments here as we go along. Like any interview, be prepared. Research the organization to which you're speaking and be prepared in terms of your appearance and be ready to go. As I just mentioned, when you click enter or when you enter whatever video chat might be used for the interview, you never know, even if you're early, who's ready to observe when you get in the room. So when you click enter, be ready to go, look at the camera, and be prepared for that interview experience. I keep preempting my own bullets, but do look at the camera. I'm trying my best this afternoon to give good eye contact to all of you through my own web camera. It takes some practice, and it is a little bit of an unnatural experience. So do practice looking into the camera like you would give someone eye contact in a face-to-face experience. I have raised my office chair this afternoon, and I am approximately at eye level with my own web camera. And depending upon your situation, you may need to use a stack of books for a computer monitor or a tablet or a smartphone, but do try to position your camera at eye level. Something I have to work on is being still. And so if you have any nervous habits, try to sit, or if you're standing for the interview, stand still and have good posture. And once again, give that good presence to the camera. Address the recruiter by name. One nice thing about most technologies, including Google, is that we can see the name of the person we're speaking to. So I can look down, and if I happen to be nervous or forget, I can look down and see Grace's name because she's been kind enough to label her screen with her name. If you forget someone's name, by all means, feel free to ask for it. That's certainly helpful when writing thank you notes. And if you're concerned about the pronunciation of someone's name, my advice is to simply ask and ask how they prefer to be referred to. Grace, any comments so far?
Yeah, these are good. You made me realize I think I have to bring mine up. I'm kind of above my camera, which is a better angle, right? But usually, and it's hard to remember to look in the camera. Like I'm looking at you as I'm talking kind of in the corner of my screen. So like that does take a lot of practice for sure. It's all about practice, and it's all about setup, getting yourself set up so that you're comfortable. If you have everything ready to go and you feel comfortable in your environment that you've set up for this virtual interview, then the interview will go smoother. You'll be more comfortable, you'll be more yourself. So it seems trivial, but it all adds up to a good interview experience as a whole, for sure.
Thank you. One nice thing about being virtual is that there's no one else in the room with you. And if you're worried about forgetting a certain fact or a certain tidbit, or if you want to have a copy of your resume next to you, no one's going to see that on the camera. So you can tape a note to your screen and have that as some backup since you are virtual in this environment.
Yeah, that's a great tip. No one will ever, dock you for having notes or taking notes. If anything, it's a good thing during an interview. As long as you're not like reading off of it, right? I mean, make it a conversation, but having those there is definitely a good tip.
I did hear from one pre-med student who had a medical school actually have her pick up her web camera and circle around the room just to make sure there was no one else in the room feeding her answers. But aside
We're
from
not that cutthroat.
yeah. So here are some additional considerations I would like for you to consider. The first being lighting. It's always better to have the light facing you, facing your face. I have a small light actually attached to my monitor now to help with this because my office is a little bit on the dark side. That could be the light coming from inside a window. Ideally, you won't have sunshine behind you. That can certainly make it hard for the person on the other side of the screen to see and decipher your face. Your background is important. Hopefully mine is not too distracting. I do have a magnet collection behind me, but certainly your background is an important consideration. It should not be anything overly distracting and certainly not anything offensive. So keep that in mind, the background that you're presenting to the people who are seeing your side of the screen. Professional attire, dress for the occasion. Normally that's going to be a suit, although that can somewhat be different for different industries. And my own advice is to have the top and the bottom match. So what do I mean by that? It's easy to think, oh, no one's going to see what I'm wearing beneath the camera level, so I can wear athletic shorts or I could wear sweatpants or pajamas. Well, what happens if you need to get up to get a glass of water? What happens if your laptop falls or your camera slips off that pile of books? So my own opinion is to dress for the part both on top and on bottom, like if you were face to face. I think we also from a psychological perspective, feel more prepared when we are dressed for the occasion.
Mhm.
Keep your cell phone ringer off, but in talking to Grace and Maggie before this session, keep it close. So why do we say that? Well, you don't want your phone going off during the interview. And even sometimes people are distracted by on-screen notifications and even vibrations. Having said that, most good recruiters have a backup plan, and that backup plan might be calling you on your cell phone. So maybe the Wi-Fi in their office fails. Maybe they're using Google Classroom for something and it goes out for whatever reason. So having your phone nearby can help a recruiter reach you in the case they need to choose a secondary form of technology. And as I mentioned, be prepared for technical issues. All of us, even on campus, have these concerns. The campus Wi-Fi goes down. The Zoom server gets bombed by an external force. Be prepared for last-minute changes. And I think when these things happen, recruiters are understanding, and certainly I welcome Grace's comments on this, but if you maintain a positive spirit, if you maintain your grace and flexibility, that's going to score you major points in the recruiting process.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I kept thinking, I was like, I need a notepad because I keep thinking of things as you're going through all these. They're all really great points. The lighting is huge, so you don't think of it, but if the lighting's behind you, you will be completely dark, which is hard to see. It's hard to connect if you can't see each other's face. So, for instance, I lost my office to my baby. It's now her nursery. So I'm working in our bedroom and I'm facing this window. It's the most freezing window in our house, but I'm like, I have to face it because otherwise I'm on video calls all day long. You wouldn't be able to see me. It's just not a good setup, right? For background, I mean, I could tell stories about things that we've seen in the background of video calls. So always be conscious of things on your wall, but also give your roommates a heads up that, this is what you're doing. So they don't pop in, so they don't walk by, after getting out of the shower. Like, you never know with these situations. So just make sure you have that queued up. I totally agree on the professional attire. I think, again, if there's a chance you'll have to stand up to close the door to get water because you're in a coughing fit. But mostly it's just how you feel. It'll make you feel like you're set up, you're ready to go, you're in that mental state. The cell phone ringer. So this made me think too, is a lot of people don't use headphones. So my actually number one recommendation is to use headphones for an interview. A lot of people's computers are just they don't sound so good when you're using the computer audio. The sound will be better through headphones. There will be less background noise coming through if you live with a lot of roommates. The other thing to note too is even if you have your phone off and it's on vibrate, some people, when they use their computer audio and their phone's right next to their computer, you can hear it buzzing still. So keep that in mind. I recommend just using like do not disturb feature is what I always do during calls. That way I can get an important phone call will come through if I need it, but everything else won't bug me. So again, really minor things, but these are things if that happens, it'll throw you off in the middle of an interview. You just want to make sure you're going to minimize anything that will distract you, throw you off, or your interviewer, just to make sure that it's a really good interview.
Those are great points. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah.
My last point here, we're all learning, recruiters are learning, students are learning, so give each other some patience and some grace because sometimes things change. And I've got a feeling as companies are innovating, we're going to see even different layers of technology enter the virtual recruiting space coming up in the next year.
Absolutely.
So I did borrow this image, but I like it a lot. And I think some of the illustrations here can really help you prepare for your own virtual interview. You can see this young woman is actually sitting in front of the mirror, like what Grace said, or not the mirror in this case, but the window. So the natural light is coming in towards her and her face. Definitely control your surroundings. So like Grace said, give your roommates a heads up that you do have an interview coming up at a certain time. Hopefully that'll prevent unexpected run-ins during the interview. Try to pick a quiet spot. I'll talk about an opportunity that we have to offer you from Career Services here in a couple of minutes. But definitely avoid lots of noise and lots of background. So a coffee shop would not, for example, be a really good place. If you do have multiple monitors set up, do know the location of the camera and try to give it your best attention. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're using a phone or a tablet, definitely prop it up. You could use textbooks, you could use, a tall riser to have that camera up at your eye level. Once again, it's good to have things next to you while you are in this virtual environment. So you can have a copy of your resume next to you. You can have a notepad to take some brief notes or just a thought or a question to ask later in the interview. You can prepare typed questions for the end of the interview when our colleagues like Maggie and Grace say, "What questions do you have for us?" You'll be prepared with that list of questions and ready to go. Finally, by all means, feel free to have a cup of coffee or a glass of water next to you, because I'd rather have you feel comfortable if you have a cough or a tickle in your throat in terms of being ready for that next question.
Yeah, agree with all of that.
So the next slide, some more reminders. Once again, dress professionally from head to toe. You never know what the camera's going to pick up, and I think you do just feel more qualified, more prepared when you are ready to go. Test your technology. If you're worried about the Wi-Fi in your campus apartment or your house on campus, try it with a roommate or a friend and make sure you're ready to go, and use the technology that's being used by that firm if at all possible. Now, in some cases, if it's something they own, you may not be able to, but many of those systems allow you to test them out before the actual day and time of the interview. We already discussed a little bit about distracting backgrounds. I like this point. Try to have between 10 and 20% of the screen above your head be blank. You don't want to get too high where your head goes, above that level. You also don't want to sink too low. You want to really have good on-screen presence.
Jason,
Yeah,
I think
please go ahead.
Arabella has her hand raised for a
Arabella,
question.
hi. Do you have a question?
Oh, I think that's an accident. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No worries. And that's a good reminder, though, that if you do have questions, by all means, type them into the chat, or you can also use the raised hand feature. But I think the chat may be the easiest way of asking a question. And Lisa Witt is monitoring those chat questions. And we'll pause here in just 1 second for our first round of questions. Just to finish up this slide, Grace really hit this right on the head in terms of headphones do prevent echoes, and they really do control the sound that is heard on the other side of the screen. Do sit with good posture. Don't lean in too much. You may appear to have like one of those athletic big heads if you lean in too much in terms of being towards the screen. Do smile, do nod as you would do if you were in a normal face-to-face experience. And I would personally avoid anything that would be overly distracting. So it's certainly fine to have jewelry, but if your jewelry is making loud jingle jangles, that may not be the best audio experience for the person in the other end of the interview.
Yep. Yeah, I think I love the point about practicing. It seems silly and it might be awkward to try and practice with a family member, a roommate, but it really is important because just like you said about smiling and nodding, the biggest thing is that this feels natural to you and to the interviewer. And it's not going to if this is your first time doing a video chat, which now everyone's pretty, used to them with COVID, but a video chat or a video interview. So it's really pretty obvious when someone's more comfortable and has done these and kind of knows how to go about them. So don't underestimate the value of practicing and just making sure that you can get your personality across. You can smile and nod and make it a conversation still, because all these interviewers want is just to have a good conversation with you, whether that's in person or virtual. So being able to just be more comfortable, I'm sure you all are after a year of virtual class and everything, but don't underestimate the power of practicing ahead of time, as silly as it might feel.
Let's take a pause here. Lisa, are there any questions as of yet in the chat?
Jason, we don't have any questions in the chat, but if anybody wants to pipe in, this is a great time to ask those questions.
So feel free to unmute if you do have a question, or you can also always use the chat feature. Well, we will have more opportunities for questions. Do not worry. So, Lisa, thank you for monitoring the chat for us. So let's talk for a moment about the one-way experience. And I know, as a matter of fact, that PricewaterhouseCoopers does not use this feature, which I appreciate, but students should be prepared that there are organizations that are screening you based upon a one-way interview. So what does that mean? Certain organizations are doing a screening experience by having you respond on video to a set list of questions. I've seen 7, I've seen 10 questions, and then either a person or in some cases a computer system, AI, might be evaluating that one-way video, and that's a screening tool used to decide whether or not you move into the next phase of their recruiting process. Now, we in career services don't love this technology because I think it limits in some ways your ability to shine and to make a difference. Having said that, part of our job is preparing you for the employers who are using that technology. And the one that I see being used over and over again is a platform called HireVue. Grace, have you heard of HireVue or any similar technologies that do the one-way screens?
Yeah, we've definitely heard of them. I know we tested them out for live interviews as well, so definitely familiar. But the names you're throwing out there are familiar to us for sure.
So here are some tips that I have for a one-way interview experience. Do read and follow the instructions. There may be a certain way to log into the platform. There may be a certain procedure to follow, and definitely follow those instructions. Meet the employer deadlines. That organization might say, complete these questions by this Friday, and you want to definitely meet and exceed the deadlines that are posted. If you create an account or if one is sent to you, definitely have that login information handy. Like a live interview, prepare and do your homework. I have seen some occasions where they give you the questions in advance, so you have really no excuse in terms of not having practiced those, but do prepare and do research the organization. Dress the part, dress for the industry to which you are being considered, just as if you were live in front of a recruiter, either through video or face-to-face, because we are always being evaluated, including during a one-way experience. Do look directly into the camera. That's the only way that either the person or the technology platform can evaluate you, is based upon your face and your eye contact, and of course, your responses. Finally, these are almost always timed experiences. So if they give you 90 seconds or 2 minutes to respond to a question, do try to stick within that time frame. Some of the software platforms allow you to even try twice or 3 times to get your answer right, but you want to look at the clock and make sure you are staying within that time frame. Grace, any comments or any advice to college students who may be facing this one-way technology?
Yeah, I know it's a little funky. I'm also glad that we don't do them, just because I can't imagine having to do that myself, but I know they're common and they can be really useful as well. So, I mean, not having had experience with them, I would just say my biggest piece of advice is kind of similar to what I was talking about before, is just make it as natural as possible, which might sound hard with something like this, but make it seem like you are talking to someone. Again, you're going to feel pretty silly doing it, but it'll pay off. And especially if they give you the questions ahead of time, you can absolutely prepare your answers, but make sure that it doesn't come across as rehearsed, right? So prepare your answers, have some talking points, but talk through it in a way like you would if someone asked you that question right away and you were having a conversation. Because again, it's a one-way interview, but it's still a chance for you, like I said, to show your personality, which is huge. It's not just the content of your answers, it's your personality shining through, your professionalism, everything like that. So while it's a little more difficult pre-recorded, still definitely an opportunity for you to make it natural, make it a conversation, if you will.
And Jason, just a couple of things. We do have a question, but I also want to play devil's advocate a little bit. Having used it before, it does truly enable a person to screen candidates when there's such a quantity. And so it is a very effective tool. And I've had students say they actually like it because they feel intimidated by a real person being on the other end. So there are pros and cons for everybody and what your personality is like, but they can be extremely effective. And Caitlin is asking us, what is the best way to prepare for testing interviews? For instance, companies such as P&G, IBM, and Reynolds require you to take various assessments before an in-person evaluation is offered.
Grace,
do you want to
Yeah,
respond to that one?
absolutely. Yeah, so we've been kind of piloting things like that at PwC. It kind of depends, and let me look at the question in the chat. It kind of depends on the type of assessment. So you're saying, okay, like any various assessments before in-person evaluation. So those could be more content-based. So if the job's really technical or really specific, then that might be something that's a little more specific to the actual job description, which obviously, you know, best way to prepare for those is, you know, kind of talk to people from that company, ask them what to expect. Maybe ask someone who's a year older or two older than you who has gone through the process for that company, and they can give you advice. At PwC, the ones that we're piloting are more behavioral assessments. So honestly, there's really no way to prepare for those. The best thing to do is just, you know, sit down, take it in a quiet place so you can think about the answers. Don't rush through it on your phone right before class. Like, take it seriously. Because a lot of companies, you know, like we were just talking about, with Lisa was talking about with high volume, companies are using these as a way to narrow down the pool, right? So you want to make sure you're considering that as an interview. So I don't know if that really helped answer your question on preparing, but I would say, you know, talk to people who have done them for those companies, whether that's friends who have interviewed the recruiter or people who have actually interned or worked for them, and just take them seriously. You know, sit down, treat it like an exam, something like that. So you have to complete those, and make sure you complete them on time, because we've done plenty of chasing for those as well.
This might sound silly, but get a lot of rest before. Our brains function in the most effective manner when we are rested and had a good night of sleep. And since some of these have cognitive features, I would encourage you to be prepared and ready in terms of having preparation before them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Lisa shared something in the chat that might be helpful.
Yeah, I also want to share, we have resources in Handshake that can be very helpful. I've shared an article that focuses specifically on virtual fairs and interviews. And in there, it talks about gamification. So there are even some gamified interview tools that are out there. There are resources listed in this article that will let you practice. Also, within Handshake, if you look up an employer in the employer database, students have gone in there and are starting to populate. Here's what my interview was like. Here's a question that they asked me. So I would definitely review that to prepare. And then this article also points to BigInterview. That's a resource that you can find a link to in Handshake through the resources. BigInterview has a teaching side to it that you can review. And then it also has a practice side where you can use the camera on your laptop and actually record yourself to some pre-recorded questions. I've had so many students say that was so helpful for them in getting prepared for these higher view type of interviews. So BigInterview, that would be my biggest recommendation in terms of practicing.
And that's another good preview. I've got a slide on BigInterview with the link coming up. So that's a great preview. Thank you, Lisa, for that. I think we have one more question in the chat.
So this question is, when they ask you to tell them about yourself, what should you include in your response?
Grace, what are you looking for when you ask that opening question of a student?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it keeps coming back to getting to know you, and I say personality, but I mean more than that, like your story, who you are, things that you know, would find out in person if you're catching up before the interview, or if you're, you know, you met at the career fair. So don't be afraid to, you know, tell them where you're from, about your family, you know, how you chose UD, like anything that you think tells your story. I mean, I'm sure you all have heard the term elevator pitch and probably roll your eyes at it at this point, but you know, it's popular for a reason, because it works, because you have X amount of time to make a first impressions. So definitely don't feel like you have to say, I'm Grace, I'm an accounting major, I have a 3.7, I'm great. You can mention those things, but this interviewer, like I said, is hoping to just have a good conversation and learn more about you as well. So include some personal facts in there too. Don't be afraid to make it personal.
I like that a lot. It is a question you can prepare for because almost every human interaction is going to begin with some sort of tell me about yourself type question. And so you really can think about what you might share. And I like to have students organize their thoughts in a series of, I call them boxes, maybe think of them as categories. And so the personal aspects that Grace mentioned is one of those categories. But maybe you have an academic category, a service category, a student leadership category. And in the course of maybe 90 seconds, you are giving that person an overview of who you are.
Yeah. And it most likely will start a conversation about, oh, you love the Cubs. I'm a White Sox fan. Okay, maybe not the best way to like start out an interview, but it'll most likely break the ice a little bit. So you could talk about something like that, and the rest of the interview, you'll take a breath and be like, okay, now we're on a human level together. Let's get into the nitty gritty of what we're actually talking about. But setting it up that way is super helpful.
Grace, are you actually a White Sox fan?
No, I'm a Cubs fan. Through and through.
Fair enough. We'll talk
Yeah.
about the National League Central, including the Reds and the Cardinals later on.
Yes, yes. Love it.
So we talked earlier about how location is important. And for some of you, you may not live in an environment conducive to a virtual interview. Well, there are a lot of places on campus where you could consider going to schedule time for an interview. And my favorite is the relatively new facility opened by Career Services called the Employer Engagement Center. You can see a picture of that center here on the right side of your screen. This building sits right next door to Career Services home in the Alumni House. It's a facility on L Street, very close to Brown, right across from Holy Angel School. And the Employer Engagement Center has 9 recruiting rooms, and these are all right now only being used by one person at a time because of COVID. We hope in the fall to have great firms like PwC back on campus using these rooms face to face. But for now, they are great places where you can have individual conversations with employers and even graduate schools. And to reserve a room in the Employer Engagement Center, simply email employerrelations@udayton.edu, which is always monitored by the Career Services staff, and we'll get back to you and confirm your reservation. Once again, there are 9 private rooms that have great internet connection. Some of them even have technology built in terms of video monitors on the wall. Really a great place to visit. And once again, that is the Employer Engagement Center. To follow up on what Lisa said, we love our BigInterview tool, and it is available on the Career Services webpage. You can get there by visiting Career Services, hovering over the Student tab, and then going to the Interview area. Or you can get there directly by going to udayton.biginterview.com. None of you on the call, to my knowledge today, are University of Dayton graduates, other than I think Lisa herself. But if you are a UD grad who is tuning in or watching this later in a video format, BigInterview is also available for all University of Dayton alumni, and you need a passcode to access the system for the first time. That passcode is 1850, the year the university opened. If you are a current student, you can access BigInterview by using your University of Dayton email address. And as Lisa pointed out, you can see here through these screenshots that if you're accessing through a tablet, through a computer or a laptop or a smartphone, BigInterview gives you the chance to learn more and practice even on video. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I do so much better after a session of practice. And so the evening before an interview, log into BigInterview. You can even check out a list of questions related to the type of job or the industry you are seeking. Anything coming through in the chat, Lisa?
Nothing at this point.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about after the video interview. I think the first thing that I would have you do is to assess your performance. Whenever we do anything, take a test in the classroom, we have a practice tennis match. We're always assessing our performance. So what did I say? How did I do? And can I do better? I would also encourage you to reach out to career services, either through those virtual drop-in hours or through reaching out to a career advisor. And we do offer mock interviews both virtually through the BigInterview tool, as well as through Zoom with a live person who works in career services. And a mock interview would really help you refine your skills. Finally, I really encourage you to send thank you notes. Something my mom always taught me is that you're not going to be rejected in life by sending someone too many thank you notes. Maybe if you send one every hour, but that's pretty darn rare. So even if the interview is entirely virtual, it's still important to show your appreciation, to thank that person, and that might help you stand out. Grace, from a firm perspective, talk about thank you notes and how you like to receive them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll always do that. They're always welcome. You'll hear partners or interviewers or anyone say, like, please email me. I mean, even Tim Ryan, our US chairman, will say, email me, and he will respond. Like, I've been copied on an email to him, and he sent back, I think it was a couple like emojis, but still. And I'm like, I got an email from Tim Ryan. But it's always, always, always recommended, and make sure it's personal. I think that's my biggest piece of advice is make sure it's not an obvious copy and paste. Make sure if you do copy and paste and then tweak it, that you tweak it correctly, the firm name, the person's name, etc. But also the biggest thing you can do is add something from the interview. So it was great chatting with you about the external audit practice. You know, can't believe we both grew up in Petoskey, Michigan, wherever. Like, add something like that they can say, oh yeah, that's who it was, because some of these people might have, you know, quite a few interviews within that week, within that day. So just throwing in a little personal note or anecdote is something that can really set you apart and makes you, again, a little more human to them as well.
How long should a student wait before sending an interview, or is as soon as possible your recommendation?
I would say, and Maggie can chime in here as well. It doesn't have to be right away. Don't feel like it has to be within seconds of the interview. Usually those people are going to be, you know, kind of backlogged on emails from that day anyways for, you know, interviewing instead of working. But I would say within a day is definitely best practice. You know, if your interview's at 9 a.m. later that day is great. If your interview's later in the day, don't feel like it has to go out at 10 p.m. And I would wait till business hours the next morning. No one minds getting emails outside of business hours, but I get, you know, sometimes get a lot of emails from college students at 2, 3 a.m. And again, it's not a bad look, but I think my advice would be just wait till the next morning. And Gmail, you can even send something, you can draft it up and tell Gmail to send it at 9 a.m. the next morning. But I would say within a day is probably, but Maggie, if you feel differently, please chime in.
I actually saw another question come through that was about, do you recommend a physical letter or an email? And I would say in this day and age, an email is completely fine. I personally like snail mail, but again, that could get to the interviewer well after the decision has been made. So I think I would lean toward email.
Absolutely.
And I think one challenge right now is that you could put something in the mail and that person works from home 10 out of 12 days. And so when is she going to receive that paper correspondence? So I think that's a great point from Maggie.
I thought you were going to point out the scrutiny of the U.S. Postal Service at this moment in time.
Oh, no, not trying to make a stand against the post office.
Not a stand, but there's a lot of, I don't know if you follow the neighborhood app, but people who are sending mail and it's taking 5 weeks, 6 weeks to get to the receiver.
Wow.
They have a real problem, and they don't have enough people.
Yeah.
And that could be another Aviate session, but for but for now, I want to give our colleagues from PricewaterhouseCoopers a chance to talk about the firm, the opportunities that are offered, especially related to internships and how students can apply. And Grace, especially know that there are over 340 students on, and while there are quite a few accounting students, we also have a pretty good diversity of majors who may want to look at roles within the firm that could be different as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I would just say the best thing you can do is definitely go to our website where you can see all of the different opportunities. There's videos of staff talking about each of the groups. There's so much helpful stuff if you just have 10, 15 minutes to click around. The opportunities that we're focused on right now are more for our freshman, sophomore population. So those younger students looking to attend what we call kind of leadership programs ahead of interning. So right now what we're looking for are freshmen for our career preview program, and that would pipeline to a start internship after their sophomore year. So a lot of what we recruit for right now are kind of these 2-in-1 offers. So for that offer, you would interview for the start internship for summer of 2022. And if you get it, it gets you an invite to a virtual this year program called Career Preview. Similarly, we have our Elevate Leadership Program. So that's the sophomore leadership program that you hear about at a lot of different companies. And that is, you would go to it this summer. Again, it's virtual, but it gets you an offer for summer of winter of 2022. So again, that's more of the freshman, sophomore population that would be looking for those, because then that internship would happen after their junior year, or the start internship I mentioned would be after your sophomore year. I know that's very confusing. So there's a quiz. If you use that QR code or go through the website, that will kind of help you see what you line up with. Also again, I meant it when people say, email me, I'll email you back. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk you through what that looks like for your timing. Opportunities wise, we do obviously recruit a lot of accounting majors. We are a public accounting firm, but we're more than that. We're a professional services firm. So we have a lot of groups within our audit, tax, and advisory lines of service that service clients in a lot of different ways. So whether that's management consulting or tech consulting or data analytics, there's many, many groups. So we'd be here for hours if I listed them all out. So that's why I encourage you to go to our website. You can put in your major, the city you're interested in, a lot of different things that will bring up where you could land, like including non-accounting majors. We talked to an engineering student earlier today, Maggie and I. So it's across the board, because in professional services, we're solving problems. We need people with all different backgrounds to solve those problems, not just 2 different majors, and that's it. Right now, we also have some 2021 positions available. So if you're a junior or senior looking for either an internship or a full-time position for this year, we do have a few remaining. Most of those were filled in the fall recruiting season, but we do have a few remaining in select cities. So again, if that's the population that you fall into, head to the website. You can search for those 2021 positions. Just make sure you're paying special attention to the cities that are listed, because the location choices will be a little bit more slim pickings than what you would have seen in the fall. But there's still some opportunities floating out there for juniors and seniors. Those applications are all due February 23rd, so a couple weeks. More than happy again to jump on a hangout with you guys. Text me, email me, anything to help you figure out what you should be applying to, if you need to wait till to apply, anything like that. So happy to help. I hope, Jason, that cover everything that you think is helpful.
That was perfect. Thank you very much, Grace.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason, can we take a minute to talk about the question that came up into the chat? Margaret was nice to respond to that, but I'd like to double back, because this is a very common question I get as an advisor. How long should I wait to follow up with a recruiter that I have not heard back from? And if you're sending questions to recruiters and you're not hearing back, Margaret shared with PwC, you can expect 24, 48 hours. Some employers, you won't hear back from them unless they're moving forward with you. I would love to hear from, either Grace's or Margaret's experience, or Jason, what else would you say about that response?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely, if you email us specifically, you can absolutely expect a response. I know there, of course, there's probably some recruiters, elsewhere that there's a lot going on, gets lost in their inbox. But emailing us directly, you can definitely expect a response. Hopefully within 24 to 48. Sometimes the weeks get crazy, but you're on our list for sure. Regarding your application, we also at PwC make it a point to send everyone a notification. So say you apply, you never email me, but you apply to a position at PwC, you'll get a response that says we received it. Either way, if you get an interview, you'll hear from the recruiter. If you don't, you should get a system email eventually letting you know that you weren't selected. That can sometimes be a little delayed. Maggie and I are actually in charge of that process for PwC. And I think last fall or one of the falls, it was close to 100,000 applications. So you can imagine sorting through all that and making sure everyone gets one. At the end of the day, you will. But long story short, hopefully you would hear back from anyone that you reach out to. But if not, don't feel bad checking in. I think it shows that you're interested in the position and that you aren't just mass applying to things, that you are really interested in PwC. So don't be afraid to check back in. Give it a day or two before you check in, and just kind of say, I'm very interested, just wanted to check back in, kind of phrase it that way, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
That's great. Thank you. We always want feedback on the sessions offered through Career Services, especially these that are offered through Aviate for path eligibility. On your screen, you do see a link to a Google Doc as well as a QR code that links to the same document. We welcome your feedback. I am quickly typing that into the chat while we are talking. And also you will see my amazing dog Bucky there on the left. Hopefully I entered this code incorrectly. If it didn't work, someone tell me. But Bucky, as I'm a dog person, would also love to hear from you and hear your feedback as well.
Jason, I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Thank you very much, Grace.
Do we need to do that to get the path point?
It is not a requirement for the path point, but it does, it warms my heart this afternoon on a cold day, but it is not a requirement for a path point. There's not a quiz or a form to fill out after we're done today.
I've also included an interview prep link to an article that's in Handshake. It has a lot of good interview resources in there, particularly if you're an F1 visa student and maybe you're interviewing in a second language. So English is a second language for you. It talks about some of the cultural expectations in an interview. So that would be a good resource for you to review.
Jason, you're getting some love in the chat.
I was saying that. I appreciate the love in the chat. Thanks to our students. I also want to promote another opportunity offered by our office, in fact, by our very own Lisa J. Witt, tomorrow afternoon. I've got some details on the slide, but Lisa, would you mind previewing the session tomorrow afternoon that's also available for a path point?
Yes, thank you, Jason. So tomorrow's session, we're going to have 15 recruiters join us from various organizations. And I'll give just a 20-minute talk on how to tell your story in an interview. And so it'll be different from what Jason has focused on how to be successful in a virtual interview. And then what we're going to do is go into breakout sessions. Each recruiter will lead an interviewer session where they actually put you through a mock interview as a group. And so it'll be 4 to 5 students per interviewer. They will do a round of questions. You'll get to answer at least one question, maybe 2. The interview will talk through your answer and ways to perform better. And it's just an excellent opportunity for you to get some feedback without the stress of it being an actual job. And everyone will be in the different groups, will be getting the same questions. We'll come back together as a group to go over any questions and give you some answers to your questions. So it's going to be a really unique session. It is capped at 70 students, and we have about 40 slots left right now. So make sure you go into 1850 and get registered for that if that's something you would like to try.
It's something new that we're doing this semester, and I'm super excited that we are offering this practice session, including the involvement of some of our key partners. So thank you, Lisa, for coordinating that tomorrow afternoon. So on the screen, speaking of contacting us, you see both Grace and Maggie and their email addresses as well as mine. And I'm going to definitely save the chat because you know, I don't get this many hashtags ever in my life. So thank you to our students for all of the kind words. And at this point, we're down to a couple of minutes. Lisa, are there any other questions that are in the chat?
Jason, I wish I could find them, but there's so many. Jason for president, Jason fan club, Jason's the man,
Wow.
University of Jason, King Jason.
My children wouldn't believe this. They would be.
Yeah, I would definitely save that for posterity. I'm looking for questions and I'm not seeing. So if you have questions, you might want to just unmute yourself and speak up now or forever hold your peace.
I'd also open up the floor to both Maggie and Grace for any final comments regarding today's workshop and interviewing.
Yeah, this chat is making my day. It's the best way to end the day, just watching this. This is why I work with college students. I love it. No, I would just say, you know, hopefully you guys picked up at least a few tips from this. And best thing, if you take away one thing, it's just, you know, make sure you're prepared, make sure you're yourself. Do your practicing. Like tomorrow's session sounds great. I think that's really, really beneficial. As much as like a pain it is to sign up for stuff and awkward to maybe do those things, it's so worth it. And I promise you it'll pay off. So if you want to do a practice run with us, if you want to just chat, ask questions, even if it's not about PwC jobs, we are available. Thanks for your time, everyone.
I would throw in there, Jason, to be able to answer the question, why do you want to work for us?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I really agree, in part because it's going to be asked. And if you can really articulate your background knowledge and your passion for that organization, it's going to put you ahead of so many other students applying for the same role.
Absolutely.
So I am mindful of time and mindful of the 1 hour obligation related to this workshop. So hey, 340 plus students took their time this afternoon to join us. That really warms my heart. Thank you. Thanks for the chat, by the way. Kind of fun. I'm going to definitely save that. But most importantly, I want to thank Maggie, McMichael, and Grace Wood from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Round of applause for you for giving your time this afternoon. And thanks to my colleague, Lisa J. Witt, for her role with the chat. We will stick around for any personal questions or conversation after we're done, but the workshop is officially over. There is no post-workshop quiz or anything. We are adjourned, but once again, thank you for your time this afternoon. And as always, go Dayton Flyers.